I stood at my husband Robert's funeral, already broken, only to have Lisa Simmons, his longtime mistress, humiliate me in front of the entire town. But when they tried to steal everything Robert and I built, they forgot one thing. Carol Simmons doesn't go down without a fight. I still remember the smell of the lilies crowding the altar that morning. Heavy, cloying, almost sour. I hated them. Robert knew that. Funny, the little things you notice when your world is falling apart. I was standing stiffly next to the mahogany casket, wearing the black dress I'd picked out 20 years ago, just in case. The congregation murmured in the pews, the air thick with whispers. I spotted familiar faces, neighbors, bridge partners, Robert's old golf buddies. But there, sitting right up front like they owned the place, were two strangers who didn't belong. A woman about my age with bleached blonde hair sprayed up high, clutching a silk handkerchief and blinking dramatically. And next to her, a broad-shouldered young man who looked so much like Robert, it stopped me cold. They had no right to be sitting there, no right at all. I blinked hard and turned back toward the pulpit, but a gnawing dread curled in my gut. I should have trusted that feeling. When Pastor Reynolds, God bless him, called for anyone who wished to speak, I braced myself. Maybe Dana, my daughter, would say a few words. Maybe a neighbor would recall Robert's barbecues. Or his awful puns. Something real. Something kind. Instead, the blonde stranger rose, dabbing theatrically at her eyes, and walked straight up to the microphone. "My name is Lisa Simmons," she announced, her voice syrupy and loud enough to fill the entire vaulted ceiling. "I was Robert's partner, his true companion these last 30 years. Gasps scattered through the pews. I froze. "Partner?" She smiled sweetly, right at me, and then, "Oh Lord," she kept going. "And while his first wife did her best," she said, voice laced with poison, "Robert never stopped yearning for real love, real understanding. I was blessed to give him that." There it was, a public gut punch in front of everyone who had ever mattered to me. My anger simmered. Dana leapt to her feet, but Pastor Reynolds caught her arm, whispering something low and urgent, probably something about not causing a scene. I just stood there, nails digging into my palms, feeling every pair of eyes slice me open. Did they really think I'd just stand there and take it? When Lisa finished her bitter little eulogy, she didn't sit down. Oh no. She waved to the young man still in the front pew. "Brian," she called brightly, "come say a few words." The man, Brian, stood and sauntered up like he was strolling into a bar. He was tall, cocky, about 35, wearing a cheap black suit that still had the store tags tucked under the collar. He adjusted the mic, grinned like he was the guest of honor, and said, "I'm Brian Simmons, Robert's real son." The room went dead silent. Even the stained glass seemed to dim. "I know many of you probably didn't even know I existed," he went on, with a smug chuckle. "Robert kept me and Mom a secret for a long time. Out of respect for appearances, I guess." My knees threatened to buckle, but I gripped the back of a pew, steadying myself. Lisa beamed like the cat that ate the canary. Brian waved a crumpled paper at the crowd. "And just so there's no confusion, Robert left everything to me and Mom. Here's his new will, signed and notarized last month." He winked at me like he was handing me a party invitation. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Robert's face in the casket seemed to smirk up at me. Betrayal, plain as day. Dana was shaking beside me, her nails digging into my arm, whispering, "Mom, don't you dare let them get away with this." The reception afterward was a blur of stiff smiles and averted eyes. People I had known for decades shuffled past me like I was a stranger. Some didn't even look me in the eye. Lisa and Brian held court near the buffet table, laughing too loudly, piling plates high with deviled eggs and cold ham. When Pastor Reynolds tried to offer me a few words of comfort, I barely heard him. I just kept staring at those two grifters, my blood turning from ice to fire. I knew then. I wasn't just mourning my husband. I was mourning the life I thought we had. But here's the thing about grief. After a while, it sharpens you. Makes you see things you overlooked before. And that's when I remembered something Robert had done just 2 weeks before he passed. He'd taken a strange, quiet trip into town. I caught him fiddling with his old safe deposit box key one evening, lost in thought. When I asked about it, he mumbled something about getting things in order. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but now I realized I hadn't seen everything there was to see yet. And Lisa and Brian? They'd made one hell of a mistake thinking Carol Simmons was too broken to fight. I barely slept that night. The house, our old farmhouse, felt wrong without Robert in it. Every creak of the floorboards, every rattle of the pipes made my heart skip. I sat up in bed with a quilt around my shoulders, staring out the dark window, going over it all again and again. Lisa's smug face, Brian waving that crumpled will like a trophy. I could have crumpled right along with it, but instead, a quiet resolve settled in my bones. If Robert really had betrayed me, I deserved to know every last detail. And if he hadn't, well then Lisa and Brian were about to learn what it felt like to pick a fight with the wrong woman. By morning, I'd made up my mind. Dana showed up at the crack of dawn, still in her pajama pants, hair thrown into a messy bun. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "Mom," she said, storming into the kitchen. "We have to fight this. I don't care how dirty it gets." Her voice cracked a little on that last word. My poor girl. She'd loved her daddy so fiercely. I set a cup of cheap instant coffee in front of her, the steam curling in the cold kitchen air. "Honey," I said, "we're not rushing into anything. First we get the facts." Her eyes lit up. "The safe deposit box." I nodded once. "We're going to the bank today." At the bank. The teller was a slip of a thing. Barely out of high school, by the looks of it, chewing pink gum and typing at a snail's pace. I slid Robert's worn brass key across the counter. "I need access to my late husband's safe deposit box." She barely looked at me. "Do you have his death certificate?" I pulled it out of my bag with a trembling hand. Seeing his name there, Robert Simmons, deceased, still hit like a hammer. She clicked her tongue, checked a few things on her screen, and then led us through a gray security door into the vault area. The walls back there were lined with little steel doors, neat as soldiers. She handed me the box and stepped politely aside. I laid it on the little table and took a breath. "Here goes nothing," I whispered. The lock clicked open, the lid creaked, and there it was, a sealed manila envelope with my name scribbled across the front in Robert's messy handwriting. My hands shook as I slid it open. Inside was a letter, and another will, a real one. Not crumpled or stained, but neatly typed, notarized, and dated just 6 weeks before Robert died. I scanned the letter first, my eyes darting over the words. "Carol," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and it's time to make things right." He confessed everything. The affair with Lisa that had started decades ago. The shame that had eaten away at him ever since. How he'd made a stupid decision years ago to secretly support Lisa and their son Brian. How Lisa had been blackmailing him to keep quiet. "I never stopped loving you," the letter read. "I was weak, cowardly, but I wanted to fix it before I met my maker." At the bottom, Robert wrote the one thing that finally broke me down into tears right there in that sterile little bank vault. "You are, and always were, the love of my life. Everything I have belongs to you, not them." I clutched the letter to my chest, shaking. Dana pressed her hand over mine, eyes shining. "Mom, it's all here." We turned to the new will. Sure enough, it named me, and only me, as the sole beneficiary. The house, the savings, the life insurance, everything. I laughed. A raw, cracked sound. "Those vultures don't know what's coming." Dana grinned, fierce and teary. "Let's turn the tables, Mom." The next few days were a blur of lawyers and paperwork. Pastor Reynolds even helped, putting us in touch with an old friend of his who specialized in estate fraud. Turns out, Lisa and Brian had filed their new will almost immediately after the funeral, pushing it through probate before I could even blink. Real slick. But once our lawyer saw Robert's latest will, she smiled like a shark spotting blood in the water. "This," she said, tapping the folder, "is gold. They're going to jail." I didn't just want the house or the money back. I wanted them exposed. I wanted the whole town to see exactly what kind of people they'd thrown their lot in with. Was that petty? Maybe. But sometimes righteous anger tastes sweeter than any apology. The court date was set. It would be a public hearing. Everyone would be there. Friends, neighbors, the same ones who had looked away from me at the funeral. Good, I thought. Let them see. Let them all see. But there was one thing still gnawing at me late at night, when the house was dark and the wind rattled the old shutters. What if Lisa and Brian had a backup plan? What if exposing the real Will wasn't the end of it? Because people like that, people who make a living off of lies, they don't just roll over and surrender. They fight dirty. And something deep down in my gut told me the worst was still coming. The morning of the hearing, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, still soaked in that heavy funeral hush. I stood in the kitchen, wrapping my hands around a chipped coffee mug. The bitter smell of brew filled the air, grounding me. Today was the day. Today, they would see me. Really see me. Not some pitiful old widow standing alone while strangers spat on her memories. Dana pulled up in her old family-sized sedan just as the first light broke over the fields. She stepped out wearing a dark green suit, her chin high, her eyes fierce. "You ready, Mom?" she said, squeezing my hand. "Honey," I said, managing a smile. I was born ready. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and desperation. We sat at one end of the wood-paneled room, me clutching my purse like it held my very soul. Dana tapping notes into her little leather notebook. Lisa and Brian swaggered in 10 minutes late, reeking of cheap cologne and bad intentions. Lisa wore a tight black dress, 2 sizes too small, heels clicking like gunshots across the tile. Brian followed, jaw clenched, shooting smug glances at the crowd. The room was packed. Neighbors, friends, even a few of Robert's old buddies from the golf course. Some of them gave me pitying looks. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Cowards. The bailiff called the room to order, and the judge, a stern woman with steely gray hair and a mouth set in a permanent frown, took her seat. I sat up straighter. Let's get this circus started. Lisa's lawyer went first. He sauntered up, oily and smooth, tossing out words like devoted mistress and hidden family like candy at a parade. Claimed Robert had a deep, enduring bond with Lisa and Brian, that he, quote, corrected past mistakes by drafting a new will in their favor. He even had a notarized copy, complete with Robert's shaky signature. I watched the judge's eyes narrow slightly as she flipped through the pages. Then our lawyer, sharp little woman named Carla Reese, strode up, heels clicking steady and sure. "Your Honor," she said crisply, "we submit into evidence a more recent will, properly notarized and witnessed, naming Carol Simmons as Robert's sole heir." Carla laid down our ace, the will from the safe deposit box, dated just 6 weeks before Robert's death. The judge's eyebrows arched. She flipped through the papers. "Significantly more recent," she murmured. Lisa's lawyer sputtered. "That document could be fabricated. My clients." Carla cut him off smoothly. "Additionally, Your Honor, we have handwriting experts ready to testify that the signature on the so-called new will, submitted by Lisa Simmons and Brian Simmons, does not match Robert Simmons' verified signatures from his bank records, mortgage papers, and prior legal filings." Dead silence. Lisa's perfectly painted face cracked. A bead of sweat slid down Brian's temple. I almost smiled. Almost. The judge leaned forward. "You're alleging fraud, Ms. Reese?" "Yes, Your Honor. We have preliminary findings suggesting the will submitted by Lisa Simmons and Brian Simmons was forged." Another ripple moved through the crowd. I heard someone gasp softly behind me. Lisa's lips moved, fast and frantic, whispering something to Brian. He shook his head, eyes darting to the door like he was about to bolt. For a moment, I let myself breathe. Maybe it was over. Maybe they knew they were beaten. But then Lisa did something that made my blood run cold. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and smiled. A wide, snake's smile. "Your Honor," she purred, "I request a recess. I have new evidence that will change everything." The judge frowned. "What sort of evidence?" Lisa's lawyer piped up quickly. "New documents recently discovered in Robert Simmons' personal files. Evidence that may supersede both wills." Carla shot up like she'd been stung. "Objection! This is a stalling tactic." The judge held up a hand, silencing us all. 30-minute recess, she said. Bring your evidence forward immediately afterward, or face sanctions for wasting the court's time." Bang went the gavel. The room exploded into whispers. Dana turned to me, furious. "She's pulling something, Mom. I can feel it." I nodded stiffly. My hands were ice cold, despite the humid air. Because I knew Lisa. She wasn't bluffing. Not completely. No, she had something. Maybe not the truth. Maybe not anything legal. But something dirty enough to cast doubt on me, on Robert, on everything. I stood up slowly, heart pounding. Let her bring it. Let her try. Because this time, I wasn't the scared, humiliated woman at the funeral anymore. I was a woman with nothing to lose, and a fire in my chest that no amount of lies could smother. Still, a tiny thread of fear wound through me. Because when someone like Lisa says she has a trump card, you better believe she's ready to use it, even if it means dragging you through hell itself. We sat stiffly in that cold hallway, the courthouse clock ticking louder with every second. Dana paced back and forth, her low heels scuffing the scratched linoleum. I stayed put on the bench, hands folded tight in my lap like a schoolgirl about to get scolded. "What the hell do you think she's pulling?" Dana hissed under her breath. I shook my head slowly. "Something slimy. Whatever it is. You don't bluff when you've got the winning hand." She threw her hands up, frustrated. "We should have expected it. People like her don't play fair. They don't even know what fair looks like." My throat was tight, but I forced out a little chuckle. Good thing I stopped expecting decency from her about 20 years too late, huh? Before Dana could answer, the bailiff poked his head out. "Back inside, ladies." We stood up, straightened our jackets, walked back into the courtroom with our heads high, even though my knees felt like jelly. Lisa was already at her table, all smiles, holding a sleek black folder like it contained the secrets of the universe. Brian slouched beside her, glaring at us like a petulant child who'd been denied a lollipop. The judge came in, her face carved from stone. "Proceed," she said sharply. Lisa's lawyer stood, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, we respectfully submit newly discovered handwritten letters from Robert Simmons, professing his intent to divide his estate among all his children, including his son Brian Simmons." He approached the bench, handing the judge the folder. Handwritten letters. I nearly laughed out loud. Handwritten letters could be anything, especially if you were a liar with a decent penmanship coach. The judge flipped through them slowly, expression unreadable. Dana leaned close to whisper, "Handwriting analysis will tear those apart too. Don't panic." I nodded, but inside, a cold coil of dread tightened around my heart. Because Lisa didn't need these letters to win the case. No. She just needed them to cause enough doubt, to drag things out, muddy the waters, and bleed me dry with endless legal fees. Lisa's whole strategy was simple: wear me down until I quit, and maybe, just maybe, break me enough that the court ordered a settlement. 50-50. A fair compromise, they'd call it. My stomach twisted. Because giving those snakes a single penny of Robert's estate would have felt like dying all over again. The judge looked up, her mouth drawn in a tighter line than ever. "These letters will need to be authenticated. I will allow them into preliminary evidence, pending handwriting analysis." I stiffened. Preliminary evidence. That meant the trial would drag out for months, maybe even years. Lisa turned around and flashed a sickly sweet smile right at me. Her eyes practically screamed, "Give up! Give in!" But she didn't know the woman she was dealing with anymore. The woman who'd once ignored every betrayal, every hurt, every slap to her dignity. She was gone. Dead and buried with Robert. Only fire was left. Carla, our lawyer, stood up calmly. "Your Honor," she said crisply, "the defense respectfully requests an immediate injunction barring Lisa Simmons and Brian Simmons from accessing or liquidating any assets tied to Robert Simmons' estate until authenticity is determined." Smart move. If Lisa thought she could grab the house or clean out the accounts while the case dragged on, she was about to be sorely disappointed. The judge nodded. "Granted." I heard Lisa suck in a sharp breath. Her mask cracked for just a second, long enough for me to see the rage burning underneath. Good. Let her stew in it. Outside the courthouse, reporters buzzed like flies. Apparently news about the secret second family and the widow's last stand made for good local gossip. Dana tried to shield me, walking fast, head down. but I stopped halfway down the courthouse steps. I turned to face the crowd. And you know what? For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like a beaten woman anymore. I felt like someone standing tall in the ruins and daring anyone to knock her down again. "Mom," Dana whispered urgently, tugging my sleeve. "Come on." But I just smiled at the reporters, gave a small wave, and kept walking, the autumn wind whipping my skirt around my ankles. Let them talk. Let the whole damn town see. I wasn't running anymore. That night, sitting at my kitchen table, I traced my finger over Robert's letter again and again. "You are, and always were, the love of my life." The words ached. They burned. They healed. Robert had been weak, yes. Foolish. Absolutely. But he'd tried to make it right. And by God, I was going to honor that. My old farmhouse groaned around me as the wind howled outside. The kitchen smelled faintly of old coffee and wood smoke. The clock ticked steadily on the wall, and I knew, deep in my bones, that this wasn't just about a house or a bank account or some tarnished legacy. It was about dignity. It was about standing up, even when everyone expected me to crawl away. It was about drawing a line and daring anyone to cross it. And come hell, high water, or 1,000 forged letters, I was ready. Because Carol Simmons wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. But just as I allowed myself that tiny, trembling moment of peace, the phone rang. And the voice on the other end? It wasn't Dana. It wasn't Carla. It was someone I hadn't heard from in years. Someone who knew things about Robert's past that even Lisa didn't. And what they said next changed everything. The voice on the other end of the line was rough, gravelly, like someone who'd spent a lifetime smoking or shouting over too many loud engines. "Is this Carol Simmons?" he asked. I clutched the receiver tighter. "Who's asking?" A soft chuckle. "Name's Hank Prentice. I was Robert's attorney for a good long stretch before he switched to that big downtown firm." The name rang a faint bell. Robert used to talk about an old lawyer he trusted back when we were first married. A plain-spoken guy who ran his practice out of a converted gas station, if you could believe it. "Why are you calling me now?" I asked, wary. Another raspy laugh. "Well, Mrs. Simmons, I caught wind of the drama unfolding over that will of his. Saw your name in the paper." I closed my eyes briefly. Perfect. Just what I needed. My humiliation making the local gossip column. "But listen," he continued, voice dropping lower. "Thing is, I got a copy of a document Robert made me promise to hang on to. Insurance, he called it. Just in case certain people got greedy after he passed." I sat up straighter, heart pounding. "What kind of document?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He chuckled again, but this time there was steel under it. "A full, recorded confession. Robert lays out everything. Lisa, the affair, Brian not even being his biological son. Hell, he even names the payments he made to keep him quiet." My hand flew to my mouth. A confession. A signed, recorded confession. Dana, sitting across the table, leaned forward, eyebrows lifted in a silent question. I nodded once, feeling the first real spark of hope ignite in my chest. "When can I see it?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'm down in Milltown," Hank said. "Got a little office still. You come by tomorrow morning. I'll hand it over personally. Robert made me promise it'd get to you. Not the court, not the press, not Lisa. You." I thanked him, probably more times than was dignified, and hung up, my hands trembling. Dana whooped, jumping to her feet and nearly knocking over her chair. "Mom, this is it. This'll blow everything up." I wanted to jump up with her, to scream and dance and cry. But I didn't, because something deep down, something old and worn and wise, whispered, "It's never that easy, not when you're dealing with vipers." The next morning, the sun rose gray and sullen behind the clouds. I wore my thickest sweater, the one Robert always said made me look like a proper Vermont farm wife, and drove the hour down to Milltown, my heart a hammer in my chest the whole way. Hank's office was exactly what you'd expect. Faded awning, cracked sidewalk, a battered Ford pickup parked out front. He met me at the door, tall and stooped, with a smoker's cough and kind eyes. We shook hands, rough and formal. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. just led me back to a battered oak desk, where a thick envelope waited. "This," he said, tapping it, "is your silver bullet." Inside, a typed transcript of Robert's confession, signed and dated, and a flash drive, tiny, plain, holding the recording itself. I skimmed the transcript, my fingers trembling as Robert's voice leapt off the page. "I loved Carol, always did. I was a fool, and I let Lisa manipulate me. Brian, he's not even my blood. She lied about that too." I pressed my hand to my chest. God help me, even now, even after everything, I felt a pang of sorrow for the man I had loved. How lost he must have been, trapped in a mess of his own making. "How solid is this?" I asked Hank, my voice rough. He grinned, showing a mouthful of crooked teeth. "Solid as granite. I had it notarized when he recorded it. Chain of custody's clean, no judge in their right mind would ignore this." I swallowed hard, blinking back sudden tears. "Thank you," I whispered. He waved me off. "Robert was a damn fool, but he wasn't cruel. He wanted you to have a fighting chance." I tucked the envelope into my purse like it was the most precious thing in the world. Because it was. Dana cried when I showed her. Straight up, full-on ugly cried, right there in my living room. Then she laughed. A wild, shaky laugh, and threw her arms around me. "We've got them, Mom," she whispered against my shoulder. "We've finally got them." I hugged her back fiercely, my own tears slipping down my cheeks. It felt like the first true breath I'd taken in months. And isn't there always a but, honey? As I sat there that night, staring into the flickering flame of my old hurricane lamp, I realized something cold and bitter. Lisa wasn't the kind to go quietly. No, ma'am, when that confession came out, she was going to lose everything. And desperate people? They get dangerous, very dangerous. I pulled the old quilt tighter around my shoulders, listening to the wind howl against the farmhouse walls. Outside, somewhere beyond the fields, a barn owl hooted low and mournful. Inside, I whispered a promise into the dark. "You come for me, Lisa Simmons, and you'd better come hard, because I'm not falling without a fight." The next morning, I woke with a start. Something wasn't right. You ever have that prickling feeling at the back of your neck, like the house itself is holding its breath? That's how it felt. The light coming through the window was thin and gray. The air, heavy like a storm, was crawling in. I sat up slowly, listening. Nothing but the faint creak of old wood and the far-off rumble of a delivery truck on the county road. Still, I trusted my gut. After 67 years on this earth, you learn to listen when something whispers danger in your bones. I dressed quickly, tucking the envelope with Robert's confession deep into the lining of my purse. No way was I leaving it unguarded. By the time Dana pulled up outside, I was already on the porch, scanning the horizon. She jumped out of the car, breathless. "Mom, somebody's been messing around the property." My heart dropped. "What do you mean?" She pointed toward the side of the house where the old cellar doors were. Together, we hurried around back, and there it was. The lock on the cellar doors had been busted clean off. Splintered wood, fresh scrapes across the paint. Somebody had tried to break in. My anger simmered, sharp and hot. "They were looking for something," Dana muttered, voice tight. "They know we've got the proof." I nodded grimly. "But they won't find a damn thing. Not here. Not in this house." I patted my purse, heavy against my side. They'd have to pry it out of my cold hands. We drove into town together, extra careful, extra slow. I kept scanning the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Brian's beat-up Ford tailing us. When we reached the lawyer's office, Carla greeted us at the door, her sharp little eyes narrowing when she heard about the break-in. "We need to fast-track the motion to introduce the confession," she said, ushering us inside. "No more games, no more delays." She made a copy of the flash drive, sealed it in an evidence bag, and filed an emergency motion with the court that same afternoon. It felt like breathing again for the first time in days. We were almost there. Almost. That night, back at the farmhouse, I triple-locked every door and window, even dragged Robert's old shotgun out of the closet. Not loaded, just visible enough to make anyone second-guess their choices. I sat by the window, watching the long, empty stretch of driveway, feeling like a soldier in a crumbling fort. I must have dozed off sometime past midnight, because the next thing I knew, crash, glass shattering, somewhere downstairs. I shot to my feet, heart hammering against my ribs. Dana had stayed the night, sleeping upstairs in her childhood room. I sprinted for the stairs, calling her name. She met me halfway down, wild-eyed and barefoot. "Mom, someone's inside." Before I could answer, a hulking figure charged out of the shadows by the kitchen, swinging a flashlight hard enough to make the air whistle. Dana screamed. I grabbed the first thing my hand could find, a heavy old iron candlestick from the hall table, and swung with everything I had. Thunk. The flashlight clattered to the floor. The figure stumbled back with a curse. Brian. Of course it was Brian. He staggered, clutching his shoulder, and for one stupid second he looked like a little boy caught stealing cookies. Then his face twisted into something ugly. Real ugly. "Give it to me, you crazy old bat," he snarled. I tightened my grip on the candlestick, rage surging through me. "You think breaking into my home makes you a man?" I spat. Behind me, Dana was dialing the sheriff, her hands shaking but steady enough. Brian lunged again. But this time, I didn't swing. I stood my ground. I stared him down, a lifetime of heartbreak and betrayal burning in my chest. And I said, low and steady, "Robert was never your father. Not by blood. And he sure as hell wouldn't have wanted you to get a damn dime." Brian froze mid-step. He blinked, confused. What are you talking about?" Dana held up her phone. Speaker on. I heard the dispatcher's voice, calm and clipped, promising deputies were already en route. "You'll find out soon enough," I said. The color drained from Brian's face. He bolted, sprinted through the busted window like a cornered rat, disappearing into the night. Dana and I stood there panting, staring after him. My hands were still trembling, but not from fear. From fury. From the pure, unshakable will to finish this fight. The deputies showed up 10 minutes later, lights flashing across the empty fields. They dusted for prints, took our statements, promised to issue a warrant. It wouldn't take long now. Brian had just made their job real easy. Breaking and entering. Attempted assault. Probable witness tampering. Lisa must have known he was coming. Heck, she probably sent him. But they hadn't counted on this old woman still having some fight left. They hadn't counted on Dana standing beside me, fiercer than any lioness. And they sure as hell hadn't counted on Robert's confession waiting like a loaded cannon. Tomorrow, we'd walk into court. We'd play the recording. We'd watch Lisa and Brian's lies crumble to dust right in front of the whole town. I could already picture it. The way Lisa's painted smile would shatter. The way Brian's cocky slouch would vanish. The way the whole rotten structure they built on deceit would come crashing down around them. And me? I'd be standing right there in the middle of the wreckage, tall, steady, free. At last. I woke before dawn the next morning, nerves coiled tight in my chest. The old farmhouse was still, except for the soft whistle of wind slipping through the kitchen window cracks. I sat at the table, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt hopes and stubborn pride. Today was the day. No more running. No more hiding. No more swallowing my anger just to keep the peace. Today, I would tear off every mask Lisa and Brian had ever worn and show the world exactly who they were. I slipped the flash drive into my purse, tucking it down deep, right next to Robert's letter. 2 weapons, sharper than any blade. When Dana pulled into the driveway, her headlights cutting through the morning fog, I squared my shoulders. No matter what happened inside that courtroom, I was walking out free, and hell help anyone who tried to stop me. The courthouse was buzzing like a kicked beehive. Word had spread fast about the break-in, about Brian's little visit to my home. I saw faces peering from the hallways, old neighbors, church ladies, even a few reporters scribbling furiously into their little notepads. Let them watch, I thought grimly. Let them see every second. Dana and I walked in side by side, both of us dressed in plain, dark clothes. No flash, no spectacle, just strength. Lisa was already there, sitting pretty in a blood-red blazer, her legs crossed high, twirling a pen between her fingers, like she was the Queen of Sheba herself. When she saw me, she smiled, a slow, venomous thing, as if she still believed she had a shot, as if she still thought money and lies could drown the truth. I held her gaze, unflinching. Not today, darling. Not ever again. The hearing opened fast. Carla, sharp as a razor, rose to her feet. Your Honor, she said crisply, before we proceed, the defense moves to admit new evidence, specifically, a sworn confession made by Robert Simmons shortly before his death. The courtroom rustled with low murmurs. Lisa's lawyer jumped up like someone had lit his chair on fire. Objection, Your Honor. This is an ambush. The judge, cool as a glacier, lifted one eyebrow. You'll have a chance to respond. Sit down. He sat, red-faced and sputtering. Carla stepped forward, holding up the flash drive. The confession clearly states that Robert Simmons disavowed any intent to leave assets to Lisa Simmons or Brian Simmons. He also reveals that Brian Simmons is not his biological child. Gasps rippled through the room. Lisa's face twisted. An ugly, involuntary twitch. For the first time, the cracks showed. The judge nodded once. Play the recording. The speakers crackled. And then Robert's voice filled the room. Tired, heavy, regretful. I, Robert Simmons, declare under no pressure or coercion that I was unfaithful to my wife, Carol. I financially supported Lisa Simmons for years out of guilt. However, Brian Simmons is not my biological son. I deeply regret the harm I caused. I hereby state that my only true and intended heir is my wife, Carol Simmons. The words hung in the courtroom like thunderclouds. Thick, heavy, inescapable. Brian's mouth hung open, stunned into silence. Lisa stared straight ahead, blinking fast, her knuckles white on the table edge. It was over. Everyone knew it. The judge leaned back in her chair, her face impassive. She tapped her gavel once, sharp and sure. Having reviewed the evidence, I find that the purported will submitted by Lisa Simmons and Brian Simmons is fraudulent. Another gavel tap, louder this time. I further order that all assets of Robert Simmons' estate be transferred to the rightful heir, Carol Simmons. One final gavel slam. So satisfying, I swear it echoed down the halls. This court is adjourned. For a moment, the room was silent. Then came the whispers, the gasps, the stares. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on me. But for once, I wasn't shrinking under them. I was standing tall, straight-backed, unbreakable. Lisa shot to her feet, her voice shrill. "This isn't over," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You think you've won, Carol? You think he really loved you?" Security moved fast, stepping between her and the rest of the courtroom. I just smiled. Slow, steady, cold. "Darlin'," I said, voice low enough for only her to hear. "I don't have to think it. I know it." She lunged forward, but the bailiff caught her, steering her roughly toward the exit. Brian slunk after her, head down, shoulders hunched like a whipped dog. The mighty heirs, reduced to nothing. Poetic, really. Outside the courthouse, the bright midday sun hit me like a blessing. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in deep. Freedom. Real, soul-deep freedom. Dana flung her arms around me, laughing through her tears. "You did it, Mom," she whispered fiercely. "You beat them." I hugged her back hard. "No," I said, voice breaking just a little. "We did it." We stood there in the sunlight, letting the last pieces of fear and hurt and humiliation burn away in the heat. There would be rebuilding, sure. There would be grief still lingering in the corners of my heart. But there would also be peace. And for the first time in a long, long time, there would be hope. The farmhouse was too quiet when I got home. You'd think after a victory like that, I'd come back floating on air, whistling while I kicked off my shoes. But instead, I walked through those old rooms like a woman visiting her own ghost. Every creak of the floorboards, every scratch of tree branches against the windows, every threadbare throw pillow, it all felt heavy, too heavy. I dropped my keys on the hallway table with a thunk and just stood there, staring at nothing. Was this what winning felt like? Empty? Dana arrived an hour later, hauling grocery bags and chattering about all the reporters who wanted interviews, about how Brian was probably halfway to Canada by now, with his tail tucked between his legs. I smiled when she needed me to, nodded in the right places. But inside, my heart was quieter than it had been in years. Because here's the thing they never tell you about surviving betrayal. Sometimes survival feels just as lonely as the betrayal itself. I made us both some tea. Cheap, store-brand peppermint. and we sat in the kitchen, letting the day settle around us like dust. After a while, Dana leaned forward, her elbows on the table. So, what now, Mom? I blinked at her, startled. What do you mean? She shrugged. You fought like hell to keep this place. To keep all of it. Are you gonna stay here? I looked around, at the sagging cabinets, the cracked linoleum, the ancient fridge that rattled like a freight train whenever it kicked on. I loved this house once. Loved it hard. But now it felt like a museum to a life that didn't exist anymore. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and said the hardest thing I'd had to admit out loud. I don't think this is home for me anymore, honey. Dana nodded, a flicker of sadness passing over her face. But not surprise. She understood. Of course she did. The next week passed in a blur of real estate agents and paperwork. Turns out when you inherit a clean title, no debt, and a chunk of Robert's insurance money, buyers come knocking real fast. One afternoon, a fresh-faced agent, no older than Brian, and a damn sight more polite, stood in my living room, breathless. Mrs. Simmons, with your location and acreage, you could get top dollar. Maybe even a bidding war. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Let 'em fight, I said, just like Lisa and Brian did. Except this time, I get to pick the winner. He chuckled nervously, not sure if I was joking. For the record, I wasn't. By Friday, the offers were pouring in. 6 figures. All cash. Quick closings. I picked a nice young couple. Newlyweds with big dreams and calloused hands. Folks who would honor the place, not gut it and flip it for a buck. When I handed over the keys at closing, I thought I might cry. But I didn't. I walked out of that bank with my head high and my heart light. I wasn't losing a home, I was setting myself free. A month later, I stood at the airport gate with nothing but a well-worn suitcase and a one-way ticket tucked into my purse. Dana stood beside me, trying and failing not to tear up. You sure you don't want to stay here? She asked, her voice thick. I smiled and brushed her hair back, like I did when she was little. Honey, if I don't do this now, I never will. The flight board blinked. Rome, Italy. First stop, on a list that stretched longer than my old grocery lists. Paris, Barcelona, Athens, Lisbon. Places I'd only ever dreamed about while scrubbing floors or cooking Robert's Sunday pot roasts. She hugged me tight, fierce as ever. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I squeezed her back just as tight. I'm proud of me too. And Lord, wasn't that the biggest miracle of all? Not that I'd survived, not that I'd won the court case, but that after everything, I could still be proud. As the plane took off, lifting into the wide blue sky, I looked down at the patchwork fields and winding roads below. Somewhere down there, Lisa and Brian were probably still licking their wounds, blaming everybody but themselves for how their lives had crumbled. Somewhere down there, my old farmhouse was finding a new life, fresh coats of paint covering old sins. And somewhere deep in my chest, a tiny, stubborn flame flickered to life again. Hope. Real, honest hope. Because sometimes the real victory isn't in what you save. It's in what you finally set free. Your pride. Your peace. Yourself. If you had told me a year ago I'd be sitting in a little sunlit cafe in Rome, sipping a cappuccino stronger than anything back home, I'd have called you crazy. But there I was. New city. New life. No one to answer to but myself. The cobblestone streets buzzed outside the cafe window. Tourists snapping photos, locals shouting and laughing in that beautiful musical Italian way. The air smelled like roasting chestnuts and sweetbread. Somewhere down the block, an old accordion player squeezed out a lively tune. I leaned back in my chair, letting the warmth of the sun soak deep into my bones. Freedom had a flavor, I realized. And it tasted damn good. I spent the next month wandering. Florence, Venice, Siena. I marveled at statues and stained glass, ate pasta until I thought I'd burst, and got lost in alleyways older than America itself. I even let myself splurge, bought a hand-stitched leather journal from a grumpy old craftsman who insisted on wrapping it 3 times in brown paper, muttering that good things deserve good keeping. And every night, in tiny hotel rooms or breezy little rentals, I wrote. Not long letters or big speeches, just fragments. memories, dreams, little pieces of myself I thought I'd lost along the way. Dana called me once a week, her voice bright and proud. "Where are you now, Mom?" "Lost in Venice," I'd laugh. "Or maybe Florence. Somewhere with good bread. You sound happy." "I am." And I meant it. God help me, I really meant it. One rainy afternoon in Florence, I stopped by a cramped post office to send Dana a postcard. While I waited in the snaking line, elbows pressed against sticky counters and impatient locals muttering in rapid-fire Italian, I spotted a dusty little mailbox tucked into the far corner. "General Delivery," the crooked sign read. Something about it tugged at me. I asked the clerk haltingly if they had anything for Carol Simmons. He scowled, shuffled through a battered bin, and pulled out a thick envelope. No return address, just my name, scrawled in an unfamiliar hand. My stomach dropped. For a wild second, I thought maybe it was Lisa, still clawing for one last piece of me. But when I opened it, my breath caught. Inside was a letter. And not just any letter. It was from Robert. Apparently months before he died, before everything crumbled, he had arranged to have this letter mailed if his estate ever went to court, if everything went wrong, if I ever needed to hear from him one last time. I sat right there on a cracked wooden bench outside the post office, rain soaking through my jacket, and read it. "My dearest Carol," it began. "If you're holding this, then I have failed you in ways I can't even begin to undo. But I need you to know, none of it, not a single moment, was about not loving you. I was a coward. I let guilt and shame eat me alive. I hurt you because I was too weak to face the truth. You deserved better. You deserved everything. If there's any justice left in this world, you're free now. Free to build a life that isn't chained to my mistakes. Free to finally be as big, as bright, as bold as you were always meant to be. Go live, Carol. Really live. Don't waste a single minute wondering if I loved you. I loved you from the first minute to the last. I was just too damn stupid to show it right. Yours always, Robert." The words blurred through my tears. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the leather journal, pressing it between pages already filled with bits of my new life. I sat there for a long time, watching the rain streak the narrow stone streets, letting the ache and the relief wash over me like a rising tide. Robert had broken my heart, but he had also, in the end, handed me the key to my own freedom, and for that, for the messy, tangled, complicated love we shared, I could finally say, thank you. That night, I found a tiny trattoria tucked between two alleys and ordered the house wine. I sat by the window, pen scratching across the pages of my journal, the candlelight flickering against the glass. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to find me. I wasn't someone's wife, wasn't someone's burden. I was Carol Simmons, a woman who had been broken, a woman who had been betrayed, and a woman who had stood back up anyway. I raised my glass to the empty seat across from me and smiled. "Here's to the rest of the story," I whispered, and somewhere deep inside me, I could almost hear Robert's voice, warm and regretful and proud. "It's about damn time." I spent the next few weeks losing myself in the world. Took a ferry to the Greek islands, where the air smelled like salt and lemons, and every sunset looked like God himself had painted the sky just for me. Wandered the narrow, winding streets of Santorini, where blue-domed roofs winked at the endless Aegean Sea. Sat in sun-drenched cafes, where nobody knew my name and nobody cared about my past. I was free. No neighbors whispering behind their curtains. No judgmental church ladies tutting over my marriage. No Lisa. No Brian. Just me, and the wide, beautiful world unfolding at my feet. I slept soundly at night for the first time in years, tucked into tiny hotel rooms, with the windows thrown open to the stars. I dreamed, in full color again. I smiled without forcing it. I started to believe, truly believe, that life didn't end at 67. It was only just beginning. One bright morning, I was sitting outside a little taverna on the island of Naxos, scribbling in my leather journal, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Dana. "Mom, can we talk? It's about Pastor Reynolds." I blinked, caught off guard. Pastor Reynolds. Robert's old friend, the man who had quietly, steadfastly supported me during the whole ugly funeral and court mess. I tapped out a quick reply. "Of course. Call any time." The phone rang almost immediately. Dana's voice was soft, hesitant. "Mom, Pastor Reynolds is retiring." I smiled. "Good for him. Lord knows he's earned it." "There's more," she said, hesitating. I could picture her biting her lip, the way she used to when she was a little girl, and had to tell me she'd broken a window with her soccer ball. "He's having a celebration, sort of a farewell gathering. He asked for you specifically." I blinked again, stunned. "Me? Why?" "He said you were a big part of the community, that you deserve to be honored too." Dana paused, and he said, "He hopes you'll come back, just for the day." The words sat heavy in my chest. Back. Back to the town where they gossiped about me. Back to the place where I'd been humiliated at Robert's funeral. Back to the memories. I traced a fingertip over the condensation on my glass. Dana, sensing my hesitation, added gently, "You don't have to, Mom. No one's pressuring you. I just thought you'd want to know." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. Would it be easier to stay here, hidden in these sunny streets, with no ghosts at my heels? Sure. But was I really free if I ran from every scar? No, ma'am. Freedom wasn't about escape. Freedom was about walking straight into the places that tried to break you, and knowing they couldn't touch you anymore. I took a deep breath, feeling the warm island breeze against my cheek. "Tell Pastor Reynolds," I said slowly. "I'll be there." The plane ride back felt longer somehow. Maybe because I wasn't rushing toward home this time. I was facing it, head on. When the wheels touched down and the terminal came into view, my hands shook a little. Not from fear. From the sheer weight of it all. How much I'd changed. How little that place could touch me now. Dana was waiting at arrivals, her smile wide and teary. She rushed into my arms like a little girl again, hugging me so tight I almost laughed. "You look amazing, Mom," she said, wiping at her eyes. I patted her cheek fondly. "Travel suits me," and it did. I could feel it. The old bitterness, the old sadness. They were still there, but they were smaller now. Manageable. Like scars faded to faint silver lines. Proof that I'd healed. Proof that I'd survived. The celebration was held in the grand suburban church, the same one where Robert's funeral had been held. Walking through those tall doors again sent a jolt straight through me. Same heavy scent of lilies. Same polished pews. Same stained glass light pooling on the floor. For a heartbeat, I thought I might turn and run. But Dana slipped her arm through mine and gave me a small, steady squeeze. "I'm right here," she whispered. And somehow, that was enough. We walked in together. Heads turned, whispers fluttered. But this time, I didn't shrink. I met every glance with calm, steady eyes. Let them look. Let them whisper. I had nothing left to be ashamed of. Pastor Reynolds spotted me immediately and broke into a wide grin, his old face lighting up. He hobbled over, pulled me into a warm, creaky hug, and said softly into my ear, "You made it, Carol. You really made it." And for once, I believed him. I truly had. The reception hall buzzed with laughter and the clink of coffee cups. Pastor Reynolds stood at the front of the room, beaming while folks lined up to wish him well. Balloons sagged from the rafters, and a battered sheet cake with "Happy Retirement" written in too bright blue icing sat half-eaten on a folding table. It should have felt festive. And in a way, it did. But I wasn't there for cake or small talk. I was there to close the book on this chapter for good. I stood off to the side with Dana, sipping weak coffee and soaking it all in. The clatter, the chatter, the easy smiles. It felt like another lifetime ago that I'd sat frozen in this very room while Lisa strutted around, crowing over Robert's coffin. Funny how places don't change. Only you do. I was about to sneak out early, figuring I'd made my appearance and kept my dignity intact, when I felt it, that prickling at the back of my neck, the hush that falls in a room when something toxic slithers in. I turned slowly, and there she was, Lisa Simmons, leaning against the doorway like she still owned the world. Despite everything, her hair was flatter now, her makeup thicker, as if trying to plaster over the cracks that life had hammered into her. She looked older, harder, beaten, but not broken. Not yet. Her eyes locked onto mine, and a thin smile tugged at her lips. She pushed off the doorway and sauntered over, weaving through the crowd like a snake through tall grass. Dana stiffened beside me. "Ignore her, Mom. She's not worth it. I patted Dana's hand. No, baby, I said quietly. I need to do this. Dana hesitated, then nodded once, and stepped back, giving me space. Lisa stopped a few feet away, close enough for me to see the fine cracks in her foundation. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then she smirked, tilting her head. Well, well, if it isn't the town's favorite martyr. I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. I just sipped my coffee and said, if you're looking for sympathy, Lisa, you're about 20 years too late. Her smirk faltered, just a hair. She laughed, sharp and humorless. You think you won? You think getting the house and the money makes you better than me? I set my coffee down carefully, feeling the weight of the room around us. Some folks were pretending not to listen. Most weren't even bothering to pretend. Good. Let them hear. I crossed my arms over my chest and looked Lisa dead in the eye. I don't think I'm better, Lisa, I said, voice low and steady. I know I am, because I never had to lie, cheat, or steal to get where I am. Her nostrils flared. You always thought you were so righteous, she spat. So perfect. I shook my head slowly. No, I said softly. I spent 30 years covering up my husband's lies, pretending my life was perfect while he snuck around with you. That doesn't make me righteous, Lisa. That makes me a damn fool. A ripple moved through the crowd, whispered gasps. Lisa's cheeks flushed deep red. But here's the difference between us, I continued, stepping closer so she couldn't look away. I learned. I changed. I stopped letting people like you define my worth. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a razor's edge. And you? You're still standing in the same spot, scrambling for scraps, blaming everybody else for the life you chose. Lisa's mouth opened, then snapped shut. She didn't have a comeback. Not this time. I smiled, a real, full, genuine smile, and stepped back. Goodbye, Lisa, I said warmly. I hope someday you find peace. And I meant it, because holding on to hate would have chained me right to her for the rest of my life. And I was done with chains. I turned, picked up my purse and walked away. Not a sprint, not a flinch. A slow, steady walk. Each step shedding the last of that heavy old life, like a snake slipping free of its skin. Dana caught up to me near the door, her eyes wide with awe. Mom, she whispered, you just obliterated her. I chuckled softly. Did I? I said, pushing open the heavy church doors. Or did she do it to herself? The autumn sun poured down on us, warm and golden. The trees had just started to turn, leaves flashing red and gold, like little flags of victory. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the crisp, sweet air. It tasted like new beginnings, like healing, like home. Not the kind with walls and roofs, but the kind you carry inside your own chest. We stood there for a long moment, just breathing. Then Dana slipped her hand into mine, like she used to when she was small. What now, Mom? She asked quietly. I squeezed her fingers gently. Now, baby, I said, smiling up at the sky. We live. The next morning, I woke up in my little rented room above the town's only bakery, the scent of fresh bread rising through the floorboards. For a minute, I just lay there, tangled in the worn quilts, letting the morning light warm my face. No Robert. No Lisa. No old fears waiting to ambush me the second my feet hit the floor. Just the steady, quiet thrum of life moving forward. It felt strange. Good, but strange. Like walking barefoot after years of heavy boots. You notice every pebble, every cool patch of earth. You remember what it feels like to move without dragging chains behind you. I met Dana for breakfast at the little diner where she worked weekends all through college. The kind of place with sticky menus and chipped coffee cups, where the regulars didn't even bother ordering because the waitress already knew. We slid into a booth by the window, the cracked vinyl squeaking under us. Dana pushed a cup of black coffee toward me, grinning. Thought you might want the real stuff after all that European frou-frou. I laughed and took a grateful sip. The coffee was strong, bitter, and burnt. It tasted like home. Dana stirred her tea, watching me over the rim of her mug. So, she said casually, what's next for you? I leaned back, letting the question settle. Funny how once the noise and heartbreak cleared, The possibilities stretched out wide and endless. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "about starting over somewhere new." Her eyebrows lifted. New? Like another country?" I chuckled. "Maybe not quite that adventurous, but somewhere fresh. Somewhere that doesn't have ghosts hiding behind every grocery aisle and gas station." Dana nodded thoughtfully. "I think that sounds amazing, Mom." She hesitated, then added, voice soft, "And maybe I come with you?" I stared at her, stunned. "You'd leave all this?" She shrugged, a little sheepish. "It's not like I'm tied down. And after everything we've been through," she trailed off, then smiled shyly. "I kinda like the idea of a fresh start. You and me. Like a team." My heart swelled so big and fast, I thought it might crack open, right there in the diner. "You sure, honey?" She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. "I'm sure." And just like that, the next chapter began to write itself. We spent the afternoon dreaming big dreams. Pulled out my old road atlas, edges worn, pages crinkled from years of use, and spread it across the kitchen table like kids plotting a treasure hunt. Beach towns, mountain cabins, little villages tucked between rolling hills. Somewhere quiet, somewhere we could plant new roots. Somewhere we weren't the widow and her daughter, but just Carol and Dana, two women making their own way. We circled towns with funny names, drew stars next to places with antique shops and bookstores, laughed until our sides hurt when we found a town called Frog Holler. We didn't know where we'd land yet, but for the first time, the not knowing didn't feel scary. It felt thrilling, wide open, alive. That evening, as the sun melted down behind the hills, we drove out to the old farmhouse one last time. The new owners had just moved in. Sweet young couple, their baby boy toddling across the porch with chubby legs and sticky fingers. I parked across the road and sat quietly, watching the golden light spill from the windows. A little part of me ached, sure. How could it not? But the bigger part of me, the stronger part, felt nothing but peace. That house had served its purpose, held its memories, carried its pain. And now it was someone else's turn to fill it with life. Dana leaned against the hood of the car, arms crossed, smiling soft. "You okay, Mom?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said, voice steady. "I'm more than okay." I pulled a small object from my pocket, a simple brass key, old and worn. The key to the farmhouse. The last little tether. I weighed it in my palm, feeling its coolness, its heft. Then, without ceremony, I wound my arm back and threw it. It arced high into the twilight air, catching the last light like a falling star, and disappeared into the tall, waving grass across the road. Dana gasped and laughed at the same time, clapping a hand over her mouth. I just smiled, feeling a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt since I was a girl running barefoot through the fields. Goodbye, old life. Goodbye, old chains. Hello, whatever comes next.